Aloha, everybody. Hi. I'm going to just check that it's working and I'm able to go live. And then we'll get started. Welcome to our March Happy Hour, our mental health book club. I know I'm a little bit belated in this and I apologize. My son got sick last Friday. So thank you, those of you who are able to tune in. I'm really excited to share about our March book. I'm curious, so anyone who's able to watch this, whether you're watching live or you're catching the replay, I'd love to hear your thoughts on this book by Glennon Doyle, Untamed. So I read this book. I actually have read this book many times just because I get like little gems out of it every time I read it. And one of the, like our first questions that are reflection prompts, I guess, was really the question of like, in what ways are we as women tamed by society's expectations of us, right? And, the book opens basically with Glennon telling this story about going to the zoo with her daughter and watching this like cheetah in the zoo. And she's watching this cheetah that's like performing, they call it like the cheetah run for the crowd. And basically this whole like scene unfolds and Glennon is like super moved by her daughter's ability to like see the cheetah as it's like turning wild, right? Like the cheetah is basically tamed to do this whole like cheetah run back and forth. And then when the cheetah gets back into its cage, her daughter sort of sees it like almost go wild in a sense, or what did she say, like turn wild again. And so Glennon uses this metaphor of turning wild, basically, of being untamed, to illustrate how, essentially we as women are tamed by birth, right? And she talks about, how this plays out in different ways, but I think that a lot of, what she's describing are things that I see. I'm sure that many of you have experienced, right? She's basically talking about the taming of women through sort of like patriarchal systems, right? Whether we're talking about like body shaming or misogyny or even, some like religious doctrine, or basically like, we're taught from a very young age that like just gender roles, right? And that we as women are supposed to basically suppress our wants and our needs and be available to care for other people. And I mean, we are, I think as women, definitely we have that tend and befriend sort of quality to us, that sort of somewhat maternal instinct, right? But does that mean that we have to not put our needs first? Like we have to constantly put other people's needs first? And I think that there's sort of this like, it gets confusing for girls, and so I think that a lot of like what spoke to me about this story and her opening, of the book in this way, is that I do feel like we are tamed and conditioned to sort of live a certain way as women. I think I talked about this, I think it was last month's book, the Sonia Renee Taylor book, The Body is Not an Apology, and a lot of what she speaks about, right? And I think in this book, Glennon is also, talking about sort of the taming or the conditioning of women, that we have to act a certain way, we have to follow a certain career path, we should try not to be too much, right? Like I actually hear this a lot from my clients, like I'm worried about being too much. But why? Like we're allowed to have needs, we're allowed to express those needs, like that is our innate right as a human being and as a woman. Even just sort of like the conditioning of, we shouldn't ask for more. We should just be grateful for what we have. We should like, build a routine and stick with it. And, don't deviate from that routine. Don't go after that passion project. Don't pursue our creative ideas. Like just, it's sort of basically this conditioning that we are supposed to follow this like linear path. And to be totally honest, I feel like I see this a lot within my therapy practice, my wellness practice. I think some of the things, the fears that tame us, certainly definitely the fear of being too much for other people, but I also see like this fear of imperfection, which I'll be honest is why I chose Brene Brown for next month's book. actually, I chose daring greatly, not the gifts of imperfection, but still, I feel like we are taught that, gosh, we're supposed to be so perfect in everything that we do, and we're supposed to wear all these hats and play all these roles and do it all perfectly, and that's just not realistic, you know? And so I think many women struggle with their mental health or their wellness because they feel like they are letting someone down, or they feel like they're not, meeting people's expectations. And in reality, gosh, we are incredible. Like, we are like seriously superheroes. I was in Target the other day and I saw a friend of mine who I think is in our group. I won't mention her, but she's a mom of 3. And I just was like, you're a freaking superhero. You're amazing. Like, the things that we are able to do as women, as moms, as, like entrepreneurs, as career, in our careers, in our families, with our friends, like the space that we can hold for each other. We are very powerful. But I think that we sometimes struggle to recognize when we need help, to recognize when we are needing more support, and to ask for that. I'll just tell a really quick story. Have a friend who sent a message recently, and it was so beautiful. She's a mom who has a child similar to my child's age, and she just was saying, like, I'm struggling, like I'm having a hard time. Just today, it's been a hard day. And I was so grateful for her vulnerability, because I can't even tell you how many days I have felt that too, right? But like, that is another way in which I think we're tamed. Like, there's this fear of being vulnerable, and like asking for some support, asking for help. And sometimes it feels like, with all of the expectations on us, that we almost feel a little crazy, like, am I doing this right? Is there something wrong with me? Right. And like one of like the most famous, I think, lines from Glennon's book is, you're not crazy. You're a goddamn cheetah, and like, she nailed it. Yeah. So sort of equating us to the cheetah that's been tamed. Right. And but what would it look like to be untamed? And I think that's sort of the next reflection prompt, is essentially like, what would it look like to break free of our metaphorical cages? Like, what would it look like to actually listen to that deep inner knowing that exists within us? And what would happen if you listen to that sort of wild, untamed inner knowing within, right? Like, how would your life be different if you were to like break free of some of the cages that you've been taught to live in? And I'll just share for myself, I feel like, my untaming has been a process, much like I imagine some of yours has. I don't even know if I really think back, like, where that untaming began. It was interesting, actually, because I made a post about, me and my sort of most untamed self. And I was looking at like pictures of myself from childhood and even from my teenage years. And there have been moments in my life where I do feel like I was, sort of that wild woman, that like most sort of free and untamed self. But a lot of my photos didn't reflect that, because there's this part of me that's like, I should be smiling. I should be, like put together. I should be this. I should be that. And for me, like, being untamed means letting go of all those expectations, like just being completely in my own element and being completely in my own, really like wild woman self. Right. And so, like, basically sort of saying a little bit of FU to whatever the expectations are. And when I was in college, and my undergraduate degree was exercise and sports science, I thought I was going to be a physical therapist, right? I got to my senior year of college, and I decided, like, this sucks. Like, I'm just not into it. Like, this is not filling me. This is not, like, I had been doing it for many years, and I was an athletic trainer, and it was probably like, I don't know, 7 or 8 years of that. And by the time I reached my senior year, I just thought, this is not what I want to be doing. It feels just like I don't feel joy in this anymore. And so I quit the program. I mean, I got my undergrad degree still in that, but I quit the program. I started exploring other options. I had taken a bunch of classes in psychology. And when I graduated college, I had no clue what I wanted to do. And I happened to come across somebody, a friend walking across campus one day, and I asked him what he was doing after college, and he said, I'm going to go move to Hawaii and I'm going to work at a camp. And I was like, that sounds cool. And that's actually what I ended up doing. I found out more about this camp. It sounded really amazing. I had worked at camps for ages. And that's what I did. I moved to Hawaii. I worked at a camp. I lived on the side of a mountain in a trailer. And I fell in love with Hawaii, this place, like literally living on the side of a mountain. in a trailer. It was so not what I had envisioned for, like myself, but it was perfect and beautiful. And I just felt like super connected to myself. And to be honest, like my path has not been linear, as I'm sure many of yours has not as well. But like after that, and I started exploring like what's next, what do I want to do? I did some traveling, and like I did live in a few other places. I had a few other jobs that like did not fulfill me, honestly. And that was part of what helped me to get on the path of like deciding what I wanted to do and deciding how to, move through the world. And I decided to go back to school and get my degree in my MSW. And that, to be honest, that's what brought me back to Hawaii after traveling for several months. I know I shared about this in a recent post. But, like there are many other ways that I feel like I have allowed myself to be untamed. So another example was, after I graduated from this program and I got this job that I actually loved. I mean, I had what I called sort of my dream job for about 10 years. I worked there for 12 years, but the last 2 years were pretty rough. And part of my untaming was giving myself permission to step down from the role of an administrator at that school and to actually leave the school because it no longer aligned with my values, and to like go off on my own and to become an entrepreneur and start a private practice. And like these were really scary things, to be honest, but I just felt called to do them. And I felt like, I don't know. I think that was part of my like listening to my inner knowing, was always, rather than listening to like maybe what society told me was a conventional measure of success, like doing more of what like sparked joy for me. And that was also, to be honest, what led to the creation of the Women's Wellness Circle. Was within my private practice, just throughout the pandemic, like meeting with so many women who were struggling and seeing, I mean, I literally still daily, I get messages from various like moms and dads and folks wanting me to meet with their children or with them. And there's just not enough access to mental health services right now because there's such a demand, and there's just sort of a short supply of therapists at the moment. And I just felt very called to be able to create more opportunities to support women's mental health. And that's part of what like starting the Women's Wellness Circle was for me, was wanting to create some safe spaces for women to be able to connect and to know we're not alone. And, like, again, that for me was a very scary thing. I had no idea what that was going to be like, but allowing myself to like move through the fear and to be able to create something, it's actually been such a beautiful process. I was actually sharing with a friend this morning that, I'm really practicing just like failing forward with this and like trying new things and, seeing what works and seeing what doesn't and seeing what resonates with you guys. And, like I even, the same woman, this friend who I was walking with today, like had the courage to change career paths at like, I think she's in her 60s, I mean, I think there are so many ways that like, if we were to break free of these cages, and we really allowed ourselves to just listen to what is calling us and to do what's in our heart, gosh, what a different life that is, rather than feeling like we have to like live inside this box. And to be honest, a lot of what I feel like, the girls and the women that are sort of drawn to my practice, it's a lot of coaching them on how to trust their inner knowing, like how to tap into their intuition, as well as how to like give themselves permission to put their needs first and to live more of an untamed life, right? And that's really scary, especially based on, if you've been brought up with certain beliefs about, success. I think that can be really scary. So, our third reflection prompt here, I'm just looking, I took some notes. So Glennon says in the book, when a woman finally learns that pleasing the world is impossible, she becomes free to learn how to please herself. And so I love this, right? Because I think that that's another thing that I see again and again and again in my private practice and in my wellness business, the people pleasing that we as women kind of are taught to do. I even see it with my younger clients, the girls that I work with, just the fear, I think, of like putting our own needs first, that we are taught to essentially please whether it's, our parents, please our teachers, please our coaches, please our friends, right? Like we're constantly feeling like we have to please our partners. That's a big one, and what's been interesting with the work that I do, I've learned that people pleasing is actually a trauma response. Like it really stems from our body's sort of learned response to avoid conflict, to survive, So I think that when we recognize that we have that people-pleasing tendency, it's important to learn how to, again, it's like learn how to sort of tap into and identify our feelings, our needs, be able to start expressing those needs, right? That's the beauty of this work that I do, is giving and creating safe spaces to be able to identify how you're feeling and what you're needing, and then to be able to go for it and to be able to acknowledge and express to others what you need, but also set boundaries around what you need. I think that's a huge, huge thing. No is a complete sentence. I think a lot of women struggle with that. I know I did for a very long time. I think that the other thing I see is just a lot of like sort of chronic worrying about how other people perceive you or us, right? And I would say there's a certain amount of that that's like age appropriate for teenagers, but as we get older, like why are we worrying about what other people think of us? Why does that matter? Can we allow other people to have whatever opinions or whatever reactions they're going to have to us and still be us, and still be just sort of your true authentic self? And I think that, like, again, coming back to the whole idea of like people pleasing being a trauma response, in order to stop that, in order to stop people pleasing, it's almost like your nervous system has to learn or relearn that you're safe in your own body and that you're safe in your own voice and your own power. And I think, again, that starts by just recognizing, what do I need? Well, one, how am I feeling? And two, what do I need, right? And then starting to speak that truth and starting to say no to what doesn't serve us. And that's been an ongoing process for me, something that I was a people pleaser for a very long time. And it took, years and years of therapy and support and different, just sort of my own healing path, I think, to get me to a place where that's just, I've let go of that part of myself that was a people pleaser. Definitely it comes back. I have moments, but for the most part, I've stopped feeling like I need to control other people's reactions to me. And I think part of me getting there, I know, I shared this in that recent, actually I think it was yesterday's post, trusting that everything happens for a reason. And I was just sharing about my path, but like having a few, quite dysfunctional and unhealthy relationships is part of what helped me to find my power and to find my voice. And honestly, like once I was able to do that, I can't go back, like once you step into that power and you learn how to do that, there are big shifts that can happen. And that's a lot of the work that I do both in my therapy practice, but also in this wellness business. That's really what I'm hoping to do, is to create spaces for women to learn how to step into their power. And, I recognize that for me, like I am a work in progress and I certainly am not perfect. I have my moments, but I feel like it's gotten so much easier to set boundaries. It's gotten so much easier to like verbalize what I need to my partner, to my friends, to my parents, right? Like it gets easier, even to my clients, being able to set healthy boundaries. And also, so not just saying no to things, but also saying yes, right? Like saying yes to joy, saying yes to self-love. Like that is actually our birthright. I find it so interesting when I say to clients, like, what brings you joy? And again, like those clients who are sort of struggling with their mental health often have a really hard time answering that question, because they feel disconnected from their joy, or their power. And so once we start working on that, gosh, it's just like this whole huge shift that I think takes place. Once we start to give ourselves permission to really operate from a place of like asking ourselves, what would give me joy in this moment, And so speaking of which, so the next question, Glennon basically, she shares in the book about easy buttons and reset buttons. And for her, like her her easy buttons were the things that she did basically to abandon herself. So like when she was feeling anxious or depressed. She was, talks about her history of like drinking and alcohol, boozing basically. But I think that the easy buttons can be anything we do to abandon ourselves, whether it's drinking, whether it's binging, whether it's shopping. I think anything in an extreme almost is an easy button, you know. Even for me, like one of my easy buttons I would say is cleaning, which doesn't sound like it would be like bad necessarily, but I can overdo it at times, like if I'm feeling anxious, like I will go a little nuts cleaning the tub. Or like my other easy buttons, sometimes just like snacking. Like I love food, I'm a foodie, and so that can be just a go-to thing. Where I'm really not tuned into myself and what I need. I'm just enjoying sort of like, the mindless eating. But I think like same thing can be true with like mindless scrolling, right? That can be an easy button. And so the idea that what she talks about is basically that we want to replace the easy buttons with reset buttons, things that actually like return us to ourself, to our like authentic self. So this could be taking a walk, this could be meditating, this could be just drinking a glass of water, standing outside, feeling the sun on your face, like whatever your reset buttons are. I know for me, again, like I've been trying to get into this habit of doing like beach walks on Friday mornings and loving that. Like that is a huge reset button for me. I did it this morning. Also just like spending time with friends, that's a reset, reading a great book for me, that's a reset. Meditating, when I practice yoga, like those are huge reset buttons for me, or even just being in nature, that's another one. So I wonder what those things are for you. I'd love to hear if anybody wants to write in the comments or, feel free to, again, even if you're watching the replay, I'd love to hear like, what are your easy buttons, the things that you might do to sort of abandon yourself sometimes when you're not really present, we're maybe more anxious or depressed. And what are the things that you do that do connect you to yourself, right? Like that actually return you to your most sort of like connected state. I'd love to hear. Okay, so there's two more reflection prompts I want to talk about. One of them is basically, so Glennon says, her quote is, who was I before I became, wait, let me restart. Who was I before I became who the world told me to be, right? And that's the whole concept of Untamed, is like, who am I in my most natural state before I became tame, before I became, before I was taught that I have to fit inside like a box. And that was where I was challenging you guys to sort of pull out and share maybe a photograph of yourself that like captures you in your most sort of like original, primitive, like most wild self. When I think of me in my like, again, my most untamed self, and a lot of the photos that I shared from that post, maybe it was last week, inviting you guys to share a photo. For me, like I feel most untamed when I'm at the beach and when I've like gone for a dip in the ocean, like my hair is just like curly, crazy, wild, frizzy. I feel just like salty and sun-kissed, and like I just don't care what I look like, for me, that's just like I feel most at home, most myself. That's my most untamed self, and so a lot of the pictures, it was interesting, again, as I was like looking for photos of when did I feel that just like total joy, it was interesting because I could see in my photos as I looked at them times in my life when I wasn't necessarily as connected to myself, right? But like almost every photo of me that is like in the ocean, by the water, in the water, like I just feel completely free. And that's just me in my most natural state. So I'd love to hear what that is for you, or if you'd want to share a photo. I mean, I really invite you guys to think about, or even just to pull out for yourself and identify that for you, a photo of you in your most sort of untamed, most wild, original self, So I'll share a little bit more. Glennon, the next and last prompt, in the book, she says, to live a life of her own, each woman must answer, what do I love? What makes me come alive? And I just love that question. Like, what makes you come alive? I know for me, when I think about like what are the things I can do to live my life with more joy, more love, more truth? For me, it really is like speaking my truth, sharing my truth, sharing my wisdom that like I've accumulated over the years of working with girls and women, so that I can be of service and in service. I think what makes me come alive is releasing other people's expectations of me, and just really, and this is where meditation and yoga has come into my life as such a gift, just allowing myself to be rather than do. You know, like for me, that's huge. Like I feel most alive when I'm in a state of being as opposed to a state of doing. You know, again, I think like the doing is a little bit of that whole being in drive mode, rather than being in our soothing system. And so, you know, a lot again of like what I hope to be able to teach in our circle is how to get into your soothing system, how to get into a place where you can just be yourself, be authentic, be real, vulnerable. I was actually listening to a podcast recently. This may be a book that we'll do as a one of our mental health book clubs, but as I mentioned, next month is going to be Brene Brown's Daring Greatly. Mostly just because I am obsessed with everything she shares, and it just so speaks to the work that I do, you know, around vulnerability and shame, and seeing vulnerability really as like an antidote to shame. Her book is excellent, Daring Greatly. So if you haven't read that, that's for next month. But the other book though that I was listening to this podcast, and this woman was on, her name is Eve Rodsky, and she was talking about her book, which is called How to Find Your Unicorn Space. And I really like this whole concept of unicorn space, because she talks about the 3 C's. Basically, she says your unicorn space is sort of like your open pursuit of self-expression. So whatever form that is for you, it takes on these 3 C's. She says it involves curiosity, right? So where you sort of feel like curious about the world around you and you're engaged, you're sort of, that curiosity is like pulling you into a flow state. And then it involves connection, where basically you feel like when you are connected to another person or other people and or sharing. So like basically, you know, sharing whatever the gift or talent or whatever the creative thing is that you're doing with others, basically. She's saying that is going to help you be more likely to persevere. And then the last thing she talks about, basically, completion. And so the idea being that like whatever your unicorn space is, whatever you are creating for yourself that is allowing you to be curious and feel connected, she's saying, you know, you're not obligated to complete anything, but we also don't want to abandon it. But can we allow ourselves to be in completion, but allow whatever we're creating to be imperfect, right? And like, I just felt like that so spoke to me, especially as I was thinking about Glennon's whole message with Untamed, that, you know, can we give ourselves permission? Like, I think that writing is probably her unicorn space. For me, honestly, like this women's wellness circle has become my unicorn space. Like, it's been really, really fun to create and to just like get to play a little bit in here and come up with new ideas. And, you know, and so it's actually been really interesting. This woman, again, Eve Rodsky, what she was saying is that a lot of the research that she's done is finding that women, especially during the pandemic, are turning to their own sort of unicorn spaces as a way to almost combat burnout, and to manage stress, and that having that creative outlet is a way, kind of that thing that makes you come alive, as Glennon is talking about, that is actually like such a healthy sort of outlet for our stress. So anyways, that's just a little bit. There's so much more I want to say, but I try to keep these to 30 minutes. I would love to hear any comments. If anybody wants to share anything, even if you're catching the replay, let me know, like what spoke to you about Untamed, or even just from this live, like, was there anything that resonated? You know, I'd love to hear you share. So thank you guys so much for tuning in, and I will hope to see you soon. We'll do another live for next month's book. And if there's anything in particular that like anyone would like me to do a live on, something that you yourself are struggling with when it comes to like your mental health or wellness, please message me or put it in the chat. I am happy to, you know, again, like create and just support. That's really what I made this space for. So thanks everybody. Happy Aloha Friday.